The resin I use comes in 2 equal parts. This one is the hardener, and I need to be pretty exact in my measurements, going right up to 14 or 28 ounces. I've tried a lot of different resins, and this is the one I'm using here. Alexa, set a 5-minute timer. You can see how the color is starting to change. Here you can still see some of the strings in the resin. I want to keep stirring it. Here I have about 1 more minute on my 5-minute timer, and I do add 2 more minutes to get rid of some of those strings. I'm ready to pour. I've got all my coasters up on cups. And on each coaster, I want to pour just enough resin. The cups I use make that a little bit hard, and you'll see on some of them, I end up pouring a little too much. I would, however, rather have too much resin than too little. As too little, it pits and it pulls away from the edges. You do see I do have gloves on. You absolutely don't want to get resin on any other surface. So here I go through and I dump resin on every single coaster. There, I've got way too much, so I'm going to share. And then I will go through and I will smooth it. Here I'm doing about 40 coasters. I think it took me about 15 minutes to apply all of the resin and smooth it to the edges, which is what you see me doing here. It is self-leveling resin. Most resin is. And I'm just using my gloved fingers to push it to the edges. You see it drips down as well. I've honestly tried to do it so that I have minimal drips, but again, that ends up in me having to rework the tiles, and I'm just not a fan of doing rework. I'd rather get it right the first time, and I have to sand the edges anyway to get rid of those sharp edges on the ceramic tiles. So when I sand, I get rid of the bumps as well as the sharp edges. I show you the bumps towards the end of this video after the tiles have dried for about 12 hours. Just carefully, don't want to get fingerprints up at the top. It's a very messy process. I have wax paper laid down right there. That helps protect my granite countertops. And I have learned that if I get resin on my countertops or my floor, which are tile, all I have to do is wait for it to dry, and then I use an X-Acto knife and it pops right off. It's super slick. And it's nice to not have to super worry about that. I do have some 99% isopropyl on hand, and I have used that in the past to wipe up some of the isopropyl, and then I learned that it just chips right off. Next, I go through with my paint stick, and I just make sure that I've got full coverage on all of my tiles. While the resin is self-leveling, this upper tier of my bar is not quite perfectly level, I don't think. So I get a little more bit drippage up here, but I'm resining my states down below, and those really need to be nice and flat. You might have noticed that I am scraping some resin up off the wax paper, and as long as too much time hasn't passed, that's just like it coming out of the cup. So I go ahead and use that, and I drizzle it on the edges of the tile, which if I'm going to get pulling away or divots, it seems to be that that's where it happens for me. This next step is my favorite because who doesn't like playing with fire? And there's something satisfying about watching the bubbles dissipate as the torch passes over. That's just a small propane torch with an attachment, and I lightly go over each of the tiles. At regular intervals, I do 2 different sweeps over each tile to get all of the bubbles out. When I was mixing the resin, you probably saw bubbles. This is how I get rid of them. All right, so that's how I resin my coasters. Hopefully that was helpful to you. And I know everyone does things a little bit different, and that's okay, but this is how I do it. Next video, which will take a day or two because I haven't done everything yet, I will show you the bumps on the coasters, as well as how I handle those and how I ultimately finish up my coasters. Like and subscribe to find out when I post my next video, and have a beautiful day.